Hello and welcome to Study with Sudhir, your digital classroom, and today we'll be looking at a poem from ICSE class 9 and 10 syllabus, and that's called The Heart of the Tree, and that's written by Henry Bunner. But before we start with the poem, two things. One, you need to subscribe to this channel and also press on the bell icon so that you can get regular updates for whatever we post on this particular digital classroom channel. Number two, look at the current setting and why this poem is so very important. In fact, this poem is very relevant even on this particular day. In fact, we have been hearing about a lot of instances about why it is so important to plant trees, why it is important to reduce the carbon footprint, why it is necessary to increase the green cover on our planet. In fact, there is a recent study in which it said only two countries, India and China, have actually increased the green cover in the entire world. So, environment of great importance in today's narrative and debate across the world. People are talking of climate change, and which is why this particular poem becomes that much more important. And for you also to realize that more than a poem, more than just a poem in the syllabus, you also need to understand the larger messaging that this particular poem is doing. It has been written in another day and age, in the 19th century, but the relevance of the poem is still very much there today. In fact, Henry Bunner was he passed away in 1896 at the age of just 41, but he wrote many poems and stories. He was an American novelist, and this remains one of his most relevant. And just imagine a poem written well over 150 years ago still remains extremely relevant in this day and age. So essentially the poem talks about the rapid and reckless development and urbanization which are taking a toll on the environment, and basically he's making a point about the advantages and the necessity for planting trees, and about how it plays an important role not just in the development of a country but also in providing a huge advantage to the next generation, to the Gen Next. So we'll be coming to the title of the poem, The Heart of the Tree. In fact, that's one of the questions that could be asked as to justify the title of the poem. So we'll come to that after we have gone through the entire poem, because that's extremely important, and we'll look at it from different angles, not just the literal meaning of the heart of the tree. So let's start with the poem. I hope you have the book in front of you and also a pen and paper in order to take down notes and also underline the keywords on the book itself. Now, what does he plant who plants a tree? What does he do? Now, one of the devices used is that he has used a question in every stanza. So the poet is actually raising a very relevant point in every stanza and kind of making the reader also think. He's also making the reader think. He's also asking a rhetorical question. He goes on to answer it himself, but he is also trying to involve the reader. So this particular device of including a question in the poem is also to include the reader and involve him and also make him think along with the poet in the to answer the question which he is raising. What does he plant who plants a tree? He plants a friend of sun and sky. So he's asking who is the person who plants a tree, and he says that he plants a friend of the sun and the sky. He plants a flag of breezes free. Essentially, that when you have plants, it creates a nice environment, and that's what creates the wind and the breeze. The shaft of beauty, the ray of beauty, towering high. He plants a home to heaven and nigh. He's using the word heaven, and says that the person who plants a tree, creates greenery, is almost like creating heaven, and that's the ultimate kind of objective, the ultimate kind of praise. For song and mother croon of bird in hushed and happy twilight heard, the treble of heaven's harmony, these things he plants who plants a tree. So he asked a question and he's answered it in that first stanza, and he concludes it by saying these are the things he plants when he plants a tree. Now, just to go through the words, the flag of breeze is free. What I mentioned, that he's able to create the breeze, but he's also using the word flag. So it also he's creating the optics. He's making you imagine a flag which is fluttering in the breeze. So basically, someone who is planting a tree is helping create the wind, helping create a swift breeze. The shaft of beauty, which essentially means the ray, the gleam of beauty, the glittering beauty. towering high. He plants a home to heaven in nigh. Nigh as in almost like a heaven. A home which is very, very similar to heaven. In hushed, for song and mother croon of bird. Now croon is something which is like humming or singing and associated with a bird and in a slightly kind of sentimental kind of manner. In hushed and happy twilight heard. Now we will come to the word treble of heaven's harmony. It essentially means that scoring a treble in a dartboard game is when the player is seen to have created perfect harmony. So what he is saying is that you are able to kind of facilitate the crooning of a mother bird and creating a situation which is very similar to heaven, and this is like perfect harmony. And in order to kind of convey harmony, the treble of heaven's harmony, the word treble essentially denotes a dartboard game which is like throwing the darts, and when he score a treble is when a player creates perfect harmony. So that's the kind of imagery that the poet has used in order to convey perfect harmony and complete perfection. Just go through more detailed explanation of this particular stanza. The poem starts with the refrain which asks, what does he plant who plants a tree, and that sets the tone for the entire poem. We instantly realize that the poet is going to explain the usefulness of planting the tree. A plant actually grows upwards and aims to reach the sun and the sky. It also needs sunlight and air to survive. And finally, the trees seem to absorb the heat and save the earth from the scorching sun, giving an impression that the sun becomes friendly in the presence of the green cover, in the presence of the trees. The poet also compares the leafy branches of the trees to a flag and the stem to the beautiful shaft. So it looks like the leaves are like the flag, and the main shaft, the main teak frame, the main branch of the shaft of the tree is like the pole of the flag. Now it's important to know, now when you talk about the word flag, now what's the significance of the word flag, and that's something you need to understand. Now flag essentially conveys independence, it conveys freedom. So the tree in that sense is also a symbol of freedom from everything which is negative, everything that is not good, everything that is ugly. So in that sense the tree becomes a symbol of positivity in this particular poem. By using the word flag, the larger implication is that it's not just a symbol of freedom, but it's also a symbol of freedom from anything which is negative and ugly, and therefore it becomes a symbol of positivity. Now by planting a tree, the man is also planting a home for the sweet singing birds high in the sky, which is near the heaven, and he has made the comparison with heaven. So he's making the earth habitable for birds and helps in maintaining the entire ecosystem, right? Because the birds are as important, because the birds will feed on the insects are also necessary for the entire ecosystem. So he's creating a place where the birds can actually have their nest and continue to be there. In quiet and happy twilight, we can hear those birds chirping, which is harmonious to heaven's own tunes. Now the entire first stanza, and the first stanza of this particular poem, the poet is essentially emphasizing on the importance of the trees in the environment and also maintaining the beauty of nature. Now look at the use of the phrases heaven and nigh, heaven's harmony, towering high, is essentially the poet is wanting to give the impression that the work of planting a tree is a very good, glorious and a very heavenly deed, right? So he's giving it like the highest marks to anyone who plants a tree. So it's also in terms of the device, what I mentioned, he's asking a question in the first sentence and answering it at the end, and he's given the answer in the entire first stanza. So that's one of the devices that the poet has used. Let's come to the second stanza. Now what does he plant who plants a tree? Once again he is asking the same question, which means that he's going to give you more details about what is it that the person who's planting a tree is actually doing. He plants cool shade and tender rain, right? He had seed and bud of days to be, and years that fade and flush again. He plants the glory of the plain, he plants a forest heritage, the harvest of a coming age, the joy that unborn eyes, underline it please, the joy that unborn eyes shall see, these things he plants who plants a tree. Interesting use of words and phrases in this particular second stanza. Now, what does he plant who plants a tree? He plants cool shade and tender rain. That's pretty obvious. And seed and bud of days to come. Now, the tree that he plants provides us with the cool shade and helps us in bringing rain. A tree will also produce seeds, right? We know that through we have studied botany. The tree will produce seed and buds in future, and that is the beginning of the future. It's the beginning of the generation next. So it is kind of talking about preserving and creating the future. And years that fade and flush again, he plants the glory of the plain. The years will pass silently, but the tree will remain there through its seeds, producing new trees. So the tree will be there, but its seeds will go on to produce new plants, new trees, and then the generation will go on and creating more and more green cover. So the trees are the main elements that make a plain area green and beautiful. So the poet describes trees as the glory of the plain. So they are the ones which are providing and bringing glory to the plain. The harvest, he plants a forest heritage. Now this is an important forest heritage. So by planting a tree and then it kind of through its seeds and buds creating another tree and then another tree, he is actually creating an entire forest. So by planting a tree, the man is planting a forest heritage. Heritage is something which is of the past and creating an entire heritage for the future generations to enjoy. The speaker mentions that planting a tree today would give fruits in the coming days. The harvest of a coming age, the joy that unborn eyes shall see. Unborn eyes is a reference to the future generations which are not yet born. These things he plants who plants a tree. So the poet means that as within a seed lies a future plant and within a bud a future beautiful flower. Similarly, when a person plants a tree, he or she is planting a beautiful day which is about to come, a day or a future which is about to come. So the plants provide the seasonal kind of when you're talking about fade and flush again. Now we have autumn, when the leaves fall, the fall season as it referred to, then there is a spring. So when the flowers are in full bloom, so there is a seasonal fading and flushing of flowers. So that is what he is referring to, the seasons which go on in a particular year. So the trees are the speaker mentioned that planting a tree today would give fruits in the coming days. Our next generations would be delighted to see so much of vegetation and reap its benefits. So the credit goes to the man who plants the first tree. Now the trees are the seed and the bud of the days to come, which is essentially referring to the future. So when a person plants a tree, he is actually planting a beautiful future. The reference is, of course, as I mentioned, is to the seasons, especially the spring and the autumn, when the trees undergo a change in vegetation and look, and the falling leaves in autumn and the blooming flowers and leaves in the season of spring. Now unborn eyes, as I mentioned, is a reference to the next generation which is yet to come to this world. So the suggestion is that the tree is being planted as a gift, as a present to the next generation, as a beautiful gift, and this will be harvested and made use by the next generation, which is why in today's context we keep talking about that today's generation, this generation should not make things worse for the next generation. We should preserve our earth planet in order to ensure that the future generations which come do not get adversely, negatively impacted by climate change. So we should ensure that our carbon footprint is less. We should ensure that we are able to have more afforestation, more forest cover, more green cover, so that future generations can also survive on the planet earth. Now in this stanza of the poem, the earth, the part of the tree, the poet is stressing on the importance of planting a tree for making the earth a better living place for future generation. It also shows, and this is important, that the poet is an environmentalist at heart. He's essentially an environmentalist at heart, and he understands the significance of not disturbing the ecology of the planet and ensuring that all of us maintain it. The third stanza. What does he plant who plants a tree? The same device of asking a question and ending it. He plants in sap and leaf and wood, in love of home and loyalty, and far-cast thought of civic good. That's one of the things that we have mentioned, civic duty to plant trees. his blessings on the neighborhood. Now, by planting a tree, the man shows his love and loyalty for his home. What is his home? His home is the earth. His sense of civic duty as in your duty as when you are living as part of society, and his blessings on the neighborhood, so that if you are able to create a green cover around the neighborhood, the people who come into that locality even later, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, will actually bless the person who actually planted those trees. So all these are reflected in the sap and leaf and wood. He plants in sap and leaf and wood, that is all parts of a particular tree, in love of home and loyalty and far cast thought of civic good, that he's also, while he's planting, is also thinking of the future generation, the unborn eyes, who will come and be able to enjoy this particular nature and environment. And all these are reflected in the sap and leaf and wood in every cell of the wood. So it's also a reference to the way a tree is actually made up. When he uses the word home, of home and loyalty, he's not just referring to the person's immediate residence or the immediate neighborhood, but also of planet Earth as a whole. Now, by planting a tree, the man directly or indirectly is contributing to the nation's growth, because his blessings on the neighborhood, who is in the hollow of his hand. Please note that it has been in capital letters H, which essentially is a reference to God. The capitalization in his indicates that the man who plants a tree is God-like. He's almost like God who is doing these things for planet Earth, and he's also some kind of a destiny maker of an entire country, and he's contributing to the growth of the nation. Holds all the earth, holds all the growth of all our land, a nation's growth from sea to sea, stirs in his heart who plants a tree. Now, the last line is very important, because he is talking about a man's heart, his feelings, dreams and wishes behind planting that particular tree. Holds all the growth of all our land, that he is kind of taking responsibility for the growth and the well-being of our entire land, and also of the nation's growth from this end of the sea to that end of the sea. And this is what leads us to the title of the poem, which is what I said right at the beginning, that we will be discussing the importance of the title of the poem, because please note that it is the heart which is really the most important organ in a human being's body. So the heart is, apart from being the most important organ in the body, because the moment the heart stops beating, the man also dies. So the poet has put the tree at the heart of the life of the planet. The poet, I repeat, has put the tree at the heart of the life on the planet. The human heart pumps the blood, which carries all the vital materials and nutrients. Likewise, a tree has certain qualities which are as essential as a human heart in the context of the life of the planet. You understand? A heart in the context of a human body, and the tree in the context of life of the entire planet. And that's what is the relationship. That's the kind of metaphor that the poet has used in order to convey the importance of the tree in the overall life and well-being of the planet. So we are talking about, so what are the larger themes of this particular poem? We are talking obviously of the environment. It's also an inspirational poem because it also teaches you a lesson on what you need to do as an individual, as a citizen, as a person living on this planet, in order to ensure that it is there in good shape even for future generations. We are also talking about the civic duties to plant trees, not just for your immediate neighborhood, but for the entire planet as a whole. We'll be talking about the personification as a device which he has used, alliteration, we'll be coming to that, and of course the title significance that I just explained to you on why the title is so significant and so apt for this poem, The Heart of the Tree. Now, looking at some of the devices that he has used in this particular poem, the point 5 refers to alliteration. Now, if you just see the poem, what does he plant? Who plants a tree? PL. What does he plant? Who plants a tree? He plants a friend of sun and sky. SS. He plants a home to heaven and I. Again the use of word HH. In hushed and happy twilight heard. HHH. The treble of heaven's harmony. Heavens H, harmony H. So you use by using alliteration, by using the same alphabet, he is able to kind of convey a sense of he's reiterating, he's creating an effect while you are reading the poem, that it's able to have an impact on the mind of the reader. Then we come to the personification. He personifies the tree when he calls it a friend of sun and sky right at the beginning of the poem. So he's able to kind of personify that he is a friend, humanize him by calling him a friend, calling the tree a friend of both the sun as well as the sky. Then of course there are use of metaphors galore in this particular poem. I mean, there are phrases like the flanks of breezes free, the shaft of beauty towering high, and those are some of the examples of the metaphors that have been used, where the leafy branches have been compared to a flag and the stem is compared to a beautiful shaft which is standing erect. So in terms of the poetic devices, in terms of the larger messaging of this particular poem, very important poem, and as I said, it's an inspirational poem, something which has deep meaning in today's context, where the earth is really facing huge challenges in terms of pollution, in terms of the dangers and the challenges to its environment, and which is why it's so important. It kind of underlines the importance of planting more and more trees in order to safeguard the planet earth for future generations to come. So do write in with your comments if you have any doubts. You could also email us at studywithsudhir@gmail.com, and I do hope this is clear, and if you have any doubts, as I said, do write in with your questions or any doubts. Thank you very much for watching.